So, first of all, thank you all for coming to this master performance called Modern Hochschule Media Theory. But I'll be describing the theory I've been working on for the past half a year that I described in key detail in my latest paper, Topological Characteristics of Communication, a Circular Approach to Media. I want to state two things before we start, and that is, this is a very radical approach we're going to talk about media. A very radical approach in the sense that it strips away completely society and context from media theory itself. Because, my dear fellows, media theory is at crisis as a field. We do not have our own methods. We do not have our own research going on. We're only partnering up with sociology, anthropology, history, economics, and further other sciences. There is value in media theory, the study of mediality. Media theory should be focusing on higher mathematics of communication, figuratively speaking. That means see how communication or any other thing that can be mediated is mediated. The second stance I want to make is, this is an open space. Our goal here is not for me to explain my theory to you, but it is to talk with you about the theory. So if you have any comments at any point, feel free to just interrupt me whenever you want. If you want to object, protest, or critique the theory, you can talk at any point. We're here just to talk amongst ourselves. This is why I wanted people to name themselves in my list, so we can keep it close and personal. So welcome to the HFK's Media Lab. First of all, I want to talk with you about how I came up with this whole idea. Do you mind if I lecture here? Many of you might know, many of you might not know, I come from a very interdisciplinary field. I started as an academic, but I also consider myself a musician. I consider myself a writer, a poet, a filmmaker, and many other things that are media related. I code on the side. I worked in marketing, and I have been bathed with media my whole life. So I am very keen of media, which is why I was so intrigued to find out that in the past 30 years or so of media theory history, there has not been serious media approaches. There has been a stop, starting from the 80s, where media theory stopped completely and started to focus itself with, the study of the internet and other banal stuff, which is fine. It's fine. I have a theory about how this came to be, but we are not here to discuss just politics of academia. So yes, when I was focusing on the study of virality in social media, I came across to network theory for the first time. And I took it upon myself to put this book into the hands of as many people as I could. It's called Linked, by ALBERT-LÁSZLÓ Barabási. He's a fine gentleman, a Hungarian mathematician, which is not one of the fathers of graph and network theory, but he did something that many theorists do not dare to do, which is, he wrote for the common man. He wrote theory, network theory, in a manner that's approachable for everybody to learn about. His goal is to get people to think in networks, to think in structure. And there is structure, of course, in pretty much anything, if you want to describe it as something structured. There's even structure in chaos. It can be described with structure. If it makes sense, that's another point, but fundamentally it can be. So, after picking up his book, I was already infected with network theory. While I was still studying media theory and communication. I combined it with the wise words of theorist McLuhan and engineer Claude Shannon. For those of you who are not familiar with his work, let me exemplify. Fernando, would you be so kind to please stand up and help me out? Hold this. We're going to be talking about the topological characteristics found in communication. I've been looking through the eyes of structuralism into media and how communication works, and I was not the first one. Claude Shannon, an engineer and mathematician from the 1940s, was also doing this, but he was doing it in a purely technical aspect. In his dissertation, A Mathematical Approach of Communication, he starts describing something called a communication system, and he was the first one to coin this term. However, he makes a clear disclaimer that we should not attach any meaning into this. This is purely for machines. This is purely technical. I will be borrowing his lingo whatsoever, so that I can explain to you my theories in a more easy and approachable manner. According to him, communication, or a communication system, consists of three parts, depending on how you want to look at them. It's maybe 3 or 5. We'll discuss in a bit. The first one being an information source. An information source is an entity, or for our purposes we'll be calling that a human being, who is wanting to communicate some sort of information across. I am aware of all the implications of what information is and what is data and what is just noise. But usually, if we're communicating willingly, we are communicating information. So we'll stick with that for now. The information source wants to get its message across from point A to point B. The second part is a destination. For communication to exist, there has to be a point B, a point where you're trying to take it from one to the other. A destination for the information of the information source. The third part is where we'll be going to focus on, which is the channel, the medium. The channel, however, consists of 3 parts. Usually technological, not always, but usually. These 3 parts are the transmitter, the receiver, and the channel itself. Let me explain to you. A transmitter is a device, or just a physical piece of whatever it is that it takes to conform one with this, such natural creatures or technical creatures. But I'll exemplify with technical creatures. A transmitter just transmits the signal from one point across the channel into the receiver. The job of the transmitter is to basically take the physical signals from our world and encode it into the channel, where there be later taken upon the receiver. The receiver then has the mirror effect of the transmitter. So instead of encoding it, it decodes it. So let me explain. If we're transmitting acoustic signals through an electric channel, the transmitter's job is to take the sound waves we're producing with our voice and put them in a sense that the channel can transmit them electrically into the receiver, which then takes the electrical signals and, well, interprets them and throws them out into the air as sound waves again. If there's any questions up on this point, I will urge you to please ask them now, because this will be the base for our whole discussion today. Is it clear what a communication system is in Shannon's words?
Sorry, not always.
Not always, in what sense?
You just said that takes 3 different parts in the channel that goes in between, and then you said it had 3 different parts.
Yes.
Not always, but most of the cases.
I said that because there's people that would regard the information source, the destination, and the channel as 3 parts, and there's people that are more precise and fine, so they separate it as the information source, the transmitter, the channel itself, the receiver and then the destination. So there's arguments for 3 and there's arguments for 5. For me, it does not make a difference, really. This is just how the system looks like. I mean,
exception.
It's a matter of perception. So after seeing this, I realized, hey, there is a common thing that I can see here that was repeated in the works of network theory, and that is structure. So I started to think, why do not we take a structural approach to media? With this, I'm not saying that structuralism is my goal as a researcher. Structuralism is not the answer. Just finding structure in things, it doesn't say anything, it doesn't tell anything, it doesn't mean anything. However, structure is a method that we can use to get new insights. A method that qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis, God forbid, do not give us. Of course, it is very self-explanatory, it's self-evident. Structure is evident. Networks are the language of structure. Networks are just the byproducts of nature itself. How did you guys came here? How did you come here to the HFK today?
Took a train.
You took the train. How did you get here? You took the bicycle. How did you come here?
The bus.
The bus. I came here by car. And a funny thing about how traffic works, about how this connection works, the train, the bus, the bicycle, they all rely on networks. To take you from point A to point B, there is a network there. I'll explain. A network, for a network to exist, it can be anything. We just not need 2 nodes or 2 points and a connection between them. So the HFK can be a point, and another place in the city, or even another city, is another point in space, which are connected through a bus, through a train, through the lines of a bicycle, through traffic. The fact that there are, many of these possibilities to connect ourselves, the fact that there are different ways to go from one point to another, streets that you're allowed to navigate one way, and others that you cannot turn back to. That means that there are limitations in structure. Everything that can be described through network theory suffers. Media suffers from the limitations of network theory. That means that gatekeeping, the fact of a node standing in between 2 things, hubs, nodes that are very popular and have a lot of connections, directionality, the possibility to come from one point to another and back or not, those things all affect networks. Hence, they also affect media. Thanks a lot. I'm going to exemplify these implications with 2 very nice examples that they're quite opposite, and in my theory, this opposition is made more evident. We're going to be talking about the church and Second World War cryptography. You see, theologists, historians, and media historians, some of them argue that the church mass in medieval times was the first real kind of mass media. See the arrow there? Church mass media. Why is that? Back then, the technology was limited to written communication. So if you wanted to have a message sent from one point to another, you will have to write a letter to that person. If you wanted to talk to another person, you had to physically go there and talk to them. So there was only 2 ways to communicate information to a lot of people back then. It was either you write a lot of letters, or you go door to door. Have you heard the news? Have you heard the news? Have you heard the news? Exhausting. What church mass did is conglomerate a big number of people, a very substantial amount of destination sources, so that one sole information source could communicate to them, because they were limited by the technological advancements of their time. We have the opposite example with Second World War cryptography. Second World War was the first war waged with electric communication in its full potential already. The radio frequencies carried the messages from one point to infinite virtually, and that was the dream of the preacher of medieval times. What would have the preacher given to have radio at his disposition? He did not have to gather everybody in physical space, but just throw out there for everybody. However, this was the nightmare of the military strategist, who was the dream of the preacher, was very problematic for somebody trying to, handle very, very delicate information, because everybody could listen to it. So they had to find a way to talk through a medium that could be listened to by virtually anybody and only target one person. Why? Because they wanted to take advantage of this new technology, of its new structure. However, the structure itself was just not meant for that. So they developed cryptography, so that only one person with the knowledge of the content could decode it. And be aware, we're not talking about content here. I do not care about content. I do not care about context. I do not care about politics or power, economics, culture, all of that. We don't care about that. That's content. That's contents. That's implications. We're talking about structure, the medium itself, pure media theory. So now we're going to talk about the 4 topological characteristics I've discovered and see what you think about them. The first one being current. Just how the water flows from the top of the mountain in a river up through the ocean. Just how electricity flows through the electric circuits of any piece of electric technology. Information flows throughout a communication system, from information source to destination. This is due to the fact that media are directed networks. Same thing we have with traffic. Some media allowed us to communicate bidirectionally, like the telephone or the telegraph, or light, or air. Some media just allow us to communicate one way. Take the example of the TV. The TV. If we're looking at news broadcasts, and the anchorman or woman makes a mistake, we cannot yell at them and tell them that they made a mistake. If we're watching a movie, if we're watching Mission Impossible, we cannot tell Tom Cruise, where are you? The bad guys are coming, the bad guys are coming. You can scream at the TV, but the actor will not listen to you. Which is very funny, because, with the introduction of the TV in the past century, people thought that they were afraid of it. They thought that maybe the people on the other side were able to see them and listen to them, just how they could see them and listen to those guys in the small crystal ball. They were not aware of the current of the electrical media, of the TV. Are there any questions about that? Funny enough, mass media usually has a one-directional current. It distributes power to only one part of the communication system and lets the other one be solely the destination source. Of course, the physical world and society is mirrored media. The hierarchies of power that we see in our everyday life are seen in media. just those with the resources to create radio stations or buy TV licenses or produce a big amount of newspapers and magazines, only those can communicate in actuality, in context. However, media itself is agentless. It does not follow an agenda. It is a thing that does not have an agenda. It does not act. It just follows. The second characteristic I identified is the dependency that media has on space and time, which is why I very unelegantly called it space-time dependency. Space-time dependency. Media either breaks physics, it breaks space and time, or depends in an absolute manner, or only relatively. There's absolute space-time dependency and relative space-time dependency. I'll explain in a bit. Take the instance of the radio. It is completely dependent on time. If you're not here at the moment when I'm transmitting and broadcasting this radio signal, you miss the message. The communication system does not work. However, the radio breaks space. I could be here. I could be outside. I could be in another field. I could be at home. I could be in another city. I could be in an island. I could be in another planet. Maybe not in another planet. And you would still receive my message. Because this radio breaks space. The opposite example. Print media. The newspaper. The book. Fully dependent on space. But breaks time. The book breaks time. I can write about it. And you can only read its content. My destination, my readers, can only get my message if they come to the book, because the book is fully dependent on space. Nevertheless, the audience can read the book today, or tomorrow, or next morning, or in 10 years. And I will be communicating through time. Media break physics, space, and time. I also talked about relative space-time dependency. The absolute space-time dependency is if the whole communication system depends on this physical fabrics of space-time. However, I found out that there's media that is only partly dependent on space-time. Take the example of the radio. We already said that it is absolutely independent of... Thank you very much, Ahmed. He's going to the cinema. Another medium. As I was saying, although the whole communication system of the radio does not depend on space, there's a relative dependency that it has. My destination source has to be close enough to the radio to listen to my message in order for them to get it. I have to be close enough to the transmitter in order for me to communicate. And it is because technological inventions usually have many media layers. Layers that are called mediatical layers, which define the third characteristic we'll be going to talk about, called velocity. Here's my favorite. Media velocity. It is very weird when you listen to the word, because you cannot really tell what I am talking about, but once you listen to the explanation, it makes complete sense. The velocity of a media depends on how many mediatical layers there are in between the information, the original information source, and the destination. Let me explain. If we stick with our example of the radio, there are three mediatical layers I can think of right now. Those being, first, in order for my voice to get carried into the transmitter of the technical aspects of this communication system that is the radio, I need to use another medium first, which is air. Air, who serves as transmitter and receiver in itself. So we have the medium of air, carrying with its physicality, with its materiality, my sound waves, the sound waves of my voice, into the microphone. That's one media layer, right there. A second one that carries the message from this transmitter into that receiving end. We have a second layer made out of electricity. But then, if you want to listen to the message, you have to be nearby it, because air, again, doing its work, transmits the sound wave generated through the radio into your ears. 3 media layers. A media velocity of 3. It's pretty slow. The same applies to the television and many other electrical media, like the computer. Air and light, physical media, velocity of 1. They do not rely on any other mediums to transmit their messages. Air and light, they just allow us to see visual information or listen to acoustic information on its own, because they're not inventions of man. And I want to make it very clear that there is no immediacy. Immediacy is a word, an exaggeration that completely blows out of proportion the actual speed with which we communicate. Look at the epistemology of the word. Immediate. Without a medium. Is that even possible? Is it possible to not have the in-between with us? Is it possible to have immediacy? To have communication without a medium? It is not. If there would be no immediacy, if there was no medium between communication, if I wanted to come to you and talk from my head to your head without any medium, without anything in between, that means that either our consciousness are simultaneous or we are one. And there's, to this day, not one piece of communication technologies that can comply with this structure. And the closest thing that there is to immediacy is reality itself. If that's created by a god, do not ask me. I'm not a theologist. I'm a media theorist. Do you have a favorite medium? The fourth and last topological characteristic we'll be going to talk about today, because we're running out of time, sadly. It is a stolen one. I stole it from another theorist called Marshall McLuhan. Brilliant man. He was a theorist in the 60s who had many crazy theories. Marshall McLuhan has this characteristic of media called media temperature. Media temperature is basically an attempt to categorize media to get. The whole story is there. You do not have to add anything to it. When you're listening to a song on the radio, all of the acoustic information you're supposed to get is already there. Hot media, cool media, on the other hand, was the television of his time, the 60s. Why, do you ask? Isn't TV high quality information? Of course it is. But at his time, TV was black and white, it was fussy, low quality image, and very, very small screens. The visual information that the TV transmitted was incomplete. They had to imagine the color of the shirts of the actors playing. They had to imagine the sizes of the things in relation to one another. The TV of today, however, gives high quality information to both the eye and the ear. And although hot media concentrates on cognition, receiving the message through your senses, and cool media depends more on abstraction, imagining through the information you have there the rest of the picture. Nowadays we have media that target many senses, both with hot characteristics. Please.
I have a quick question. Does choice play into the temperature of a medium?
Of course. The temperature of a medium also demands engagement out of the audience, which means that if you're looking at a high quality TV image, but you're not as engaged, you still might be able to pick up something. However, if we're talking about a cool medium like poetry, and you're not fully focused, you might miss a part of what the author intended. I used to be, because I come from a McLuhanistic school of thought, I used to defend his theories very much. But I see now that they are outdated and they need revision. Media temperature should be accounted for in all senses of the human being. Let me explain to you why. When you are listening to the radio, your eyesight does not shut down, does it? Your skin does not stop to feel. Your nose does not out of a sudden stop working. You still have your reception. Receiving parts of your cognitive systems are still on. They're just not being called for. So, if we say that the TV from nowadays has two different high quality signals that have to be taken. Fernando, please help me again here. That means that we have two media channels that are being put into use. The first one being the eye, and the second one being the ear. One of them transmits acoustic information, the other one optical information, both in hot media temperature. So what I'm saying here is that media temperature depends, of course, in structure. However, it should be thought of in different channels of reception to each and every sense that we have. When you leave this room today, I want to make something clear. And that is that there is power in structure. There are implications, there are limits and affordances of what a medium has to offer. And to twist McLuhan's words, to expand them, if the medium is the message, the medium is communication. Thank you very much to all of you to have come here. I wish you guys a nice trip home. If there are not any questions, I invite you to grab a drink and let's us, you know, enjoy the rest of the evening.